Well, I'm a huge fan of just getting started. So I think we'll just get started.
All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Hubert Laws. I wanted to send out a big thank you to PDX Jazz, who produced the Bienn Portland Jazz Festival, for creating moments like this where we can hear the stories and get into the history and really get into the depth of the music beyond what many people are aware of. And I just wanted to say that me and Mr. Laws, the last time we met was actually the first time we met, which was at a memorial service for Creed Taylor. Creed Taylor, a very famous jazz producer who was behind the label CTI, and amongst the most impactful recordings on this label. And this label had such a huge effect and shaping of the sound of jazz from the late 60s through the 70s. Amongst their catalog was an amazing run series of albums recorded by this gentleman here, Hubert Laws. Brian's song, Afro Classic, The Rite of Spring, personal favorite of mine, Morning Star. Thank you for all that great music.
Thank you very much.
Why don't we just, since we mentioned, the illustrious Creed Taylor, let's kick off with the whole CTI story. How did that start? And I know there's a story there.
There are a lot of stories. We don't even have time to go through all of them. But my initial contact with Creed Taylor was, believe it or not, was in Memphis, Tennessee. He didn't live there, but he had flown down there to engage a local rhythm section to record an album for Hank Crawford. But Hank Crawford had some complications that kept him from fulfilling that obligation. So at that particular time, I was working a TV show, band headed by Billy Taylor. Billy Taylor had assembled a group of musicians that was supposed to be the cream of the crop in New York City. In fact, it was the best paying job in New York City at that time. And for some strange providential reason, I get this call from Creed asking me to fly down. First, I must tell you, before that, we'd assembled in the green room at the TV studio where David Frost was doing his show. In fact, we were the music band for David Frost. I don't know how many of you know that guy, but he had a TV show just like Johnny Carson and some of the other late night TV hosts. And Billy Taylor said he had convinced the producers that he had assembled the most, not so much prestigious, but the most skillful musicians to do that work. So he told us, he said, you guys, because musicians in New York would take the best paying jobs. So he says, you guys can't send in substitutes because you're getting a lot of money with this gig. So, the first time I had to take off was I had a convention that I was determined to do. Billy Taylor allowed that. But the second time, I got the call from Creed in Memphis. Now, I do not know to this day why I made that choice to leave that show. Mind you, it was the best paying gig there in New York City, but for some strange reason I chose to fly down to Memphis. At the time, I was already signed with Atlantic Records. I'd been with them about 4 or 5 years. So I had a record deal. But Creed called me, Hubert, I've got this rhythm section down here. Can you come down and record with it? Now, that rhythm section had already done a recording with Herbie Mann, who was another flute player, and he had recorded something called Memphis Underground. It was very, very successful in terms of profits. So, but for some reason I went on down there and I forfeited my job in New York City with the David Frost Show. So that was the very first album that Creed did for his label. Before that, Creed had produced for Prestige, bumping with Wes Montgomery and a whole bunch of other artists, Quincy Jones and other artists. He was very successful as a producer, but he decided he wanted to start his own label. And it just so happens I was honored to be the first one on that label. It was called, as you mentioned earlier, Crying Song. Mind you, after that, there were other artists that were engaged with the label. People like George Benson, Freddie Hubbard, Ron Carter, Bob James. I said Freddie Hubbard, didn't I? But excellent musicians. And I was very happy to be just a part of that chorale of musicians. But it started with Crying Song, and as Ashley just mentioned, some of the other records we did there. But as it turns out, that label developed such a height with all of those artists that the big record companies like CBS or Sony, other record labels, they wanted to emulate the quality of the CTI label. And believe me, the quality was not only audio, but it was visual. They had the best in graphic artists. Creed was like that. He chose the best when it came to quality in every area. When it came to, first was with the sound, audio. He chose the best recording engineer, Rudy Van Gelder, who ended up winning or being awarded the National Endowment for the Arts Award, which is usually given to musicians, but it was given to Rudy Van Gelder. Now, it's very interesting because as I look back, I think of the history that was developed over all that time that I was a part of. At the time, I didn't really look at it that way. I just simply wanted to be involved in playing music, making friends with music and developing my skill. But I had no idea it would come to what happened today, for instance. I would not have known Ashley would be sitting in front of you had I not been a part of the history of that particular label. Because the big labels just kind of, they sort of just swooped up all of the artists from the CTI label because they thought they could reestablish the same kind of, what is the word for it? The kind of charisma or the kind of reputation that this label had created for itself, or that Creed had done, because really because of Creed, he was the main component to that formula that yielded the wonderful music during that particular time. Even to this day, many musicians, when they approach me, they mention the label first. We were so gratified by the music and the quality of music that was produced by that label, CTI. So that's enough of that. Now, you may want to talk about something else, but I just want to let you know these artists who were part of that is what created that whole ambience of sound and made a lot of friends, not only locally, but globally. It's interesting, too, that even after the professional connection I had with Creed, we developed a friendship. I went to another label. I was one of those who sort of gravitated toward I went to Sony. George Benson went to Warner Brothers. Bob James went to Sony, and there was Bruce Lumbaugh was the head of the music department there. Freddie Hubbard was a part of that. Some other musicians went there, but I had left his label because this meant more universality to what the music would be exposed to. So, we remained friends. As a matter of fact, Creed would call me. We spoke like once a week. He had a place down in Pompano Beach, Florida, and one in New York City. I I had a couple places, one in Florida and two in Los Angeles. But we stayed in touch with each other. We developed a close personal relationship after the production of all of the music. So most recently, this is where I met Ashley. They did a memorial for him because he traveled to outside of Nuremberg, Germany, to visit with his mother-in-law. Harriet was his wife, and her mother's, they're German. And that's where he had this heart attack, and it just saddened me so much because I just lost another good friend of mine, Chick Corea. And but anyway, that's all this is kind of coming to my mind. You're the cause, you're the catalyst.
I don't want to stop you.
Okay, well, give me another direction now.
I hope that there was so much information you packed into your memories there, and all I can say is if you can get a hold of any of a physical copy of one of these CTI albums, especially that idea that they look as beautiful as they sound, these really were gems of the 1970s, and to this day, hip-hop DJs and producers, crate diggers, as they're called, really treasure these albums, but not only because of the music, but because they just look so beautiful. And I just want to give a shout out to the photographer who provided the images for a lot of the CTI covers, Pete Turner.
Yes. Who's
also, unfortunately, up there with Creed, and they're partying somewhere right now. But it was one of those 360-degree type efforts where, the way it looked, the way it was packaged, the liner notes, and the music inside. One of the things I've always wanted to ask you is, especially in a title like Afro Classic, there's a reference being made to your classical background. And you have played with the New York Met, you've played with,
Not the baseball. I am not a baseball player.
Really, a clutch player, but on flute.
Yeah. Well, okay, I thought of something you just said was another catalyst for me. Yes, I played with the New York Metropolitan Opera Orchestra,
right,
and also the New York Philharmonic. That was when Leonard Bernstein and Pierre Boulez and Zubin Mehta were the conductors. I had a chance to sit next to my flute teacher from the Juilliard School. He was the first flute for 28 years here in the New York Philharmonic. So I had that. Julius Baker.
Baker, right.
Yes. But now you mentioned something earlier about hip-hop artists. Yes, CTI Records were responsible for the introduction of my music to people like LL Cool J and Jay-Z, because recently their artists sampled a couple of my songs that I've written, and it's proven to be very, very profitable.
Mailbox money.
Yeah, absolutely. I have no idea the kind of money that can be made with music, and I never really pursued it. I never really pursued music as a form of making a lot of money, but it was just like it was a fringe benefit from that, and that's why I am so sold on the fact that what a man sows, he will reap. I believe that you have to work hard for what you want to achieve, because that word extraordinary means extra work. See, most people today, they feel that they feel so entitled. I see it happening ubiquitously, where people feel that they're entitled to things. Where I've come from a school, a training of working hard in order to reap what your work produces. You mentioned something else, Ashley, I wanted to comment on, but maybe you have to remind me again.
Okay. Not a New York baseball team, I know it isn't that. But the whole idea of you having the freedom, the license that Creed gave you to dig into your classical roots, and naming an album Rite of Spring, and digging into Stravinsky and finding a way of making that work within a jazz context.
Yes. I must mention a very important component to that. We mentioned Creed Taylor, but there was another person who was very, very skillful in his writing and arranging. His name is Don Silvesky. Now, Don Silvesky, I met his son at the memorial that day.
Right.
He was in a wheelchair himself. I couldn't believe it because I met him when he was a little kid. And I asked him about Don. He said Don was not doing very well. But Don Silvesky was, I've been so honored with so many skillful people, and Don was one of them. He was responsible for the collaboration we did with the Stravinsky's Rite of Spring and ultimately being released. I remember specifically Don sitting out in his car in front of Rudy Van Gelder's studio and sketching out the arrangement for the Rite of Spring with pencil. So we go into the studio, and in fact, I still have.
You mean all the parts?
The parts. Wow. Absolutely. I mean, it's amazing. You know, I arrange as well. I mean, but there's the skill of writers. It just amazes me. I mean, when I say, I mean composers and arrangers who have, their tool is not like a trombone, a trumpet, saxophone, but it's that score.
Right.
That's why I'm so gratified. In fact, when I get on a plane, I often listen to works of like Shostakovich and Rachmaninoff and Rimsky-Korsakov, and these guys, they didn't have television back there, so they could dedicate most of their time to that skill of putting on paper what they heard. And let me tell you guys, I don't know how many of you are musicians, but that is a special skill, and the only way I can explain it is because there had to have been some kind of a divine intervention, because these people have a skill that's beyond even my recognition or knowing how they did it. For instance, one of my favorite pieces now as I listen, it's about an hour long. I even heard when I was a kid. It was premiered in Houston, Texas. And Leopold Stokowski was the conductor, and it was the Shostakovich 11th Symphony. Now, you would not believe that thing. There's so many parts going on, like different conversations going on musically, because you know in music you have sentences, but they're musical sentences. Now, this is far beyond people today because I think society is being dumbed down by the music that's being presented and being this prevalent. And I think correspondingly, it sort of affects our cognition. But at that particular time, I was able to hear this wonderful composer, but there are many of them, Richard Strauss, Johann Strauss, he's another composer, not Johann, but I'm talking about Richard. And Richard wrote this piece called Ein Heldenleben. That's German for a hero's life. And all of these pieces just captured my heart, and I still listen to them. And I just wish if people were able to expose themselves to that level of music, my goodness, it would enhance your life so much. I'm so gratified by it. Nothing gratifies me except the human, interaction more than this music. Music is a wonderful, wonderful gift. And I think it's been corrupted in many ways by superficiality, lack of appreciation for the profundity of music. And I just lament the fact that so many people are bereft of this wonderful satisfaction that we can get from music, because music is more than just something to make you dance to or clap your hands to. No, it has a deep effect. In fact, I've heard my good friend Bob James' wife had Alzheimer's, and the last thing that she remembered in her long decline in Alzheimer's was music. She recognized music, melody. You see, it shows how it has a deep effect on us if we will avail ourselves to it. And you're not going to get it in the mainstream. Because the mainstream focuses on superficiality. I've come to find that even since I was a little kid. There's never been a time that I've noticed that substantive music was promoted by the mainstream. It's not only in music, it's in other disciplines in life. It's in our food, in medical treatment. So you're not, generally speaking, we don't get substantive materials or help for ourselves. We have to dig deep. Look, when I was a kid, I couldn't hear jazz. I was born in Houston, Texas. So I could not hear the music that I came to realize was substantive and had a real deep effect on you until I had to search for it. Like I told you earlier, you have to work hard in order to benefit yourself and to pursue things that are qualitative. And that's what we really are designed to benefit from the best things. But we're not going to get the best things through the mainstream. And I found out the mainstream have been the main protagonist for mediocrity and below mediocrity. Wow, I'm preaching.
It's feeling like Sunday morning here.
No, this is 7 days a week. When I get a chance, I do that. I can see how contaminated so many minds are, and around me. And thinking ability is a prize that we all should try to pursue. Finding the truth. There's truth in music. There's truth in food. There's truth in medicine. But you've got to really pursue it. I played a concert in Orange County, California, recently, and a whole group of students. Those kids are so hungry for quality. So after the concert, they met with the pianist Mike Garson, and I didn't even know they had a little conference back there. But when they left the conference, about 20 of them, we were walking out together, and they looked at me. I said, "Where you guys came from this clinic?" They said, "Yes, we did." I said, "Did he tell you something that can benefit you?" And they looked up at me, and I said, "You know what? I don't have very much time with you, but there is a biblical proverb that says, 'Buy truth and do not sell it.'" Wow, their reaction was just like it was very silent, but they were interested. They were very interested. They wanted to know, what do you mean by that? So I took a little bit of time. I said, just like I said earlier, there's truth in music, there's truth in medicine, there's truth in food, there's truth in religion. But you have to work for it. You have to find it. It's very rare. Like I couldn't find jazz in my hometown. All I could hear in Houston, Texas was, what was that music called?
Jump blues?
No, it was country and western. So the only time I could hear music that was very substantive was late at night, and very on the end of the dial, you could hear a lot of static. But that was my introduction. I was about 12 years old.
That's amazing.
But I recognize, see, that's the thing, it has the ring of truth. See, when you hear the truth, you can recognize, because it resonates with you, you're made to recognize it. But often it's obliterated or it's overshadowed by the readily presence of the mainstream. Because the mainstream, you don't have to work for it. It's there. You go sit on your chair after you come from work and even look at the news. It's ever present. You walk into a restaurant, they've already decided what music is going to go into your ear. You don't have a menu. I was in South Africa recently. I walked into a restaurant and a very nice lady handed me a menu, but they'd already had the music. I says, "Do you have a menu for that music?" Because it's very important. Because look, what's important more than that goes here is what goes here. Why? Because you can decide what to go here if you already know if what goes in here is qualitative. You see? Now, I hear some amen out there. So I'm sure that you can sort of recognize what I'm talking about. You see? So, but music was the barometer for me. It was like the microcosm for everything else. For other disciplines that I experience now, and it's an excellent analogy. I know that music is not, quality music is not going to be promoted by the mainstream. And people wonder why there's so much problem. There's so many problems with human relations and understanding. It's because music is one of the catalysts. It actually drives you to do things. So why are you seeing all these tragic events going around? Because they have not fed the right material here that reaches your brain and heart.
Guys, I hope you remember some of the albums and recordings that have been shared with you by Mr. Laws. And speaking of great albums, we have a really special reunion for you right now. Please welcome to the stage Brian Jackson. And when I say classic album, of course, I'm talking about the famous Gil Scott-Heron album, Pieces of a Man, which introduced Gil and Brian Jackson to the world and was made extra special in 1971 by the participation of some very, very skilled jazz players, including Mr. Laws, and Ron Carter and Bernard Purdie, etc. Brian, welcome.
I want to get this out of the way right away. Okay. As an 18-year-old, all right, who was writing music and had no idea where we were going to go with it, Bob Field,
I know him.
brought you into a studio with Ron Carter and Bernard Purdie. And what happened that day was that you actually legitimized everything that I've done since then. Yes, you did. Had it not been for what you brought to that music, I wouldn't be standing here right now. I wouldn't be here right now. So thank you so much. Thank you.
I'd like to say this. It's very interesting. This is so, I don't know, it's like serendipity here. But a friend of mine in Los Angeles wrote me because she wanted me to participate in some kind of an award ceremony in L.A. Her name is Gina Kronstadt.
Oh, yeah, I know Gina. I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, this happened just within the last couple of days. So I hadn't really heard of you until she mentioned your name. She said, "Oh my God, I wish I could be there for that concert." But she mentioned your name. I said, "Wow, now who is this guy?" Yeah. So anyway, I'm very happy to meet you. This is a totally spontaneous statement that I'm making here because with her mentioning your name and saying what she said, that legitimized the quality that you were involved in.
Thank you. And I just have to explain maybe a little bit about how that could happen. These gentlemen, how many sessions would you do a day?
Quite a few.
So, you know what I mean? So it was more of a situation where I'm going to come in, Bob Field called me and he told me to come in and do this session. Never seen the music before, never heard of me. Fine, it doesn't matter. They're going to come in and they're going to give 1,000% every time. And, I don't know how many recordings that you were on, but every one of them, you have to understand that they gave 1,000%. That is like a superhuman task. And then probably after you did our session, you probably went off and did another one.
It happened like that in New York back in those days.
Yeah. So that's, so it doesn't surprise me at all that you don't remember that one session, that few hours in time, but I do.
Okay.
Please be welcome.
I think we should just also, the whole idea of PDX Jazz, bringing this kind of moment together, curating, Brian opening for Hubert Laws, it doesn't just happen, okay? It's like, the kind of thing that people dream about making happen and revisiting this incredible milestone of a musical statement, which was Pieces of a Man. And the flute playing on that album, like you said, it was totally legitimized and took your music with Gil Scott-Heron and just elevated into some of the most important music coming out in 1971. People talk about Marvin Gaye and Stevie Wonder that year, but Gil Scott-Heron and you, all of that was just as important.
That was a crazy year, wasn't it? 1971. And you're talking about Sly Stone, where there's a riot going on. Eugene McDaniels with Headless Heroes of the Apocalypse. I mean, every time I think Miles, it was Live Evil. I think it was that year, was it?
That's right.
I mean, so many. To be in that year and to have released something in 1971 of all years, and to have stood out enough to have gotten any type of notice whatsoever is like still, it just blows my mind.
Some other background information. Bob Thiel, much like Creed Taylor, came out of Impulse Records in the 1960s. He's famous for having worked with John Coltrane in the latter part of his career. And then he left Impulse to start his own label. Much like Creed did with CTI, Bob started Flying Dutchman.
Yes.
And he was a big poetry fan. And that's how Gil and Bob Thiel first got together. And the deal was what? If you did okay with the poetry album, I'll do a fully produced music album.
Exactly, because Gil said, hey man, I'm cool with doing the poetry and all, but I don't really want to, I'm not really, me and my boy Brian, we write the songs. And he's like, what is it, 1920 or something like that. We write songs, man, we want to record our material. And Bob was like, oh, slow down a little bit, slow down. I asked you to do some poetry. And he's like, well, maybe I won't do it, And he said, okay, come on, chill, just chill. Hold on a second, So this is the deal. If you do okay with your poetry album, then yeah, we'll talk about it. We'll revisit this conversation. And well, that was the first time that the revolution would not be televised. Was on. And, it wasn't the one that everybody knows about, but it was the precursor to it. And it was because of that we got the license and we got the chance to record.
And then you went to Bob with the list.
Yeah, I had a list, man.
Tell us about the list.
Oh man. So of course you were on the list, way out. Like I said, okay, I want Wayne Shorter, I want Elvin Jones, I want Buster Williams, Ron Carter. I was like, how could we have even put all those people in the studio? I mean, I had a list like as long as my arm, man. And he said, well, hold on a second, I'll make some calls. At the end of it, he called and he said, well, I couldn't get Elvin Jones, but I got Bernard Purdy. Is that all right?
I remember Bernard Purdy. Bernard Purdy, he used to do a lot of TV commercials. And Bernard Purdy, that guy was funny. He drummer, he'd come to the studio 30 minutes in advance. He had all his placards talking about Bernard Purdy, the hit maker. He placed it in front of the control window for everybody to see.
He's still like that, isn't he?
I don't know. I saw him. The last time I saw him, I think it was in Detroit or some jazz festival in Detroit or Chicago. And he was, still very, jovial, very comical, but promoting himself.
I got a question for you.
Okay.
On this album, there was a song called "When You Are Who You Are," and out of nowhere, you busted out with an alto sax.
I did?
Yes. You gotta tell me about that though, man. What was up with that? Why did you bring an alto sax?
I used to play alto saxophone. I played alto saxophone. I played tenor saxophone with Mumble Santa Maria's group.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, I played. Right. And in fact, I played those instruments with the group that ultimately became known as the Jazz Crusaders, because we left high school. We left high school in Houston, Texas. And we had a caravan for 4 vehicles. I had the worst vehicle. I had the only runner. And Joe Sample had just bought a brand new Chevrolet, and Stix Hooper was I remember just distinctly all these little details. It's amazing. And we had a caravan of vehicles that left Houston, Texas, and traveled to Los Angeles in seeking like more fame and more experience. And but I left that group after 2 years from Los Angeles because I got a scholarship to go to school in New York City. But they ultimately became known as the Jazz Crusaders and then the Crusaders. But I was playing alto saxophone with that band. Wilton Felder was playing tenor saxophone. Wayne Henderson, trombone. And Joe Sample was on piano, and we called him Lala, he was a bass player at that time. And Stix Hooper. Stix was the pioneer. He was the one who sort of put the group together in high school.
I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm. That's why I played alto saxophone.
Okay, all right. Well,
Talk about a major seed to the future of popular music. These were the cats on so many R&B and pop albums and the sessions in LA in the 1960s. Joe Sample, Wilton Felder, Stix Hooper, Wayne Henderson, and if they weren't performing on these albums, they were producing or writing.
Yes.
They had such an impact on pop music in the 1970s. It's unbelievable.
I just found out recently that Wilton Felder played bass also, and then he had played on I Want You Back, the Jackson 5, and other things.
Believe it or not, now this is interesting, because during the time we were in high school, I had heard a group called the Australian Jazz Quartet, and in that quartet there was a bass, drums, flute, and bassoon. That was the conversation of the group, and I was so impressed by that. And that sound was very special. So, guess what? That's when. There was another part of the story. I don't want to get into that, but I got a flute. Wilton got a bassoon, and that was a part of our sound. See, you don't know about that, but that was the beginning. But the reason why Wilton began playing the bass is because our original bass player left the group in Los Angeles. His name is Henry Wilson. We call him Lala. Still alive, by the way. In fact, he and I and Stix are the only surviving members of that original group. But so Wilton learned to play the bass in order to take the place of Lala, who left the group. So there were 5 of us at that time. We left Houston at 6, but then there became 5. So Wilton was on bass, and you had Joe Sample piano, Stix on drums. I was playing tenor saxophone, we played Wilton and flute, and then Wayne Henderson on trombone.
Guys, we have a question here.
Yes, Hubert, I'm Ernie, Harold Jones' son.
Oh, where is Ernie? Oh my God, I almost called your mother the other day.
What did you do now?
I was just going to call to find out how she was. Because she's a widow of a good, in the classical flute player, his name is Harold Jones, his father. Wow. Okay, what's the question? I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. So here's a question I always wanted. This may have been some people, so too bad. You're talking about quality, and I grew up listening to quality flute music, as you know, and you hear some, not all, but some jazz recordings with this poor tone and scratchy flute. It's like, why is that acceptable with flute? It's not acceptable with any other instrument.
Okay, that's very interesting. I'm glad you asked that question. Because, the technology is such, there's a lot of sampling. How many of you do not know what sampling is? You don't know what sampling is? Okay, there's the original sound of instruments. Let's say like an oboe or flute. There are scientists who are able to emulate that sound by pressing a keyboard, and it can be reproduced close to that sound because they'll sample that sound digitally. They can reproduce that sound. When I first heard the reproduction of the flute sound, I couldn't believe it. Why? Because they had sampled the sound he's describing.
Oh.
In other words, it was not the genuine, what I had come to know to be the genuine sound of the flute. because I was attracted to the flute by the way I heard it in the symphony orchestras. That's why I searched for someone who could teach me, give me flute lessons in Houston, Texas. Turned out to be Clement Baroni. And but that was my pursuit of it. Like I told you earlier, there's truth in everything. Truth and sound. You know, the difference, who can tell me the difference between music and noise? Anybody? I saw you raise your hand. Did you? Okay. Just blurt it out if you can tell me.
Technology interference?
What?
Technology interference?
The difference between music and noise.
It's organized.
Okay, that's
Beautiful.
that's decent. I hear.
That's the purpose.
Music has feeling.
What?
Music has feeling.
Rhythm, melody, harmony.
And it's
No. Let's just say we got one note. We hear one note.
It's intense.
That one note. How can you? Does that give you a feeling?
Reproducible.
Okay. It's very interesting. Some of those are good, pretty good, but really the difference between music and noise is regular vibration and irregular vibration. You see, there's truth to it. See, because you have a regular vibration. Now, who set up those regular vibrations? Who set that up? So it comes from a source we have to recognize. It's organized. It's organized, just as the universe, and we revolve around the sun. Even when you look at the nucleus, one of the smallest particles in matter, it's organized. It's organized sound, whereas noise is disorganized sound. That's why I told you earlier, there's truth in everything. Okay? So, to answer your question, Ernie, are you still there? Because I have a problem with my vision.
There it is over there.
Okay. So, yes, the common concept of the flute sound was like that, because these guys who played saxophone and the double on flute, they did not reproduce the sound that the flute can really produce. So the overall concept was that's the way the jazz flute was supposed to sound. So that's why you hear a lot of expulsion of air, and it's not the center of the sound. So when these scientists sampled, they sampled that, the corrupted sound. The sound is outside of that sound that really depicts or projects the sound of that instrument. And that's what I pursued. I wanted to play the flute differently. I wanted the sound that I'd heard in the orchestra. These guys in the orchestra, they have tone exercises. They develop their sound. That's your voice. Everybody has a voice. And it's so interesting how they're all different. They're all different. But there's a reason why they're all different. Because they have a different shape and it's organized. See, the reason why we're in so much trouble as a human society is because we're outside the bounds of that organization, or the organized sound, or the organized, let's see, what is it? The organized structure. I tell many of my friends, structure dictates function. I'm quiet so you can let that resonate. Okay? Structure dictates function. Now this microphone in front of me is structured for me to put my voice in so you can hear it amplified. My sister gave me a lamp about a year ago. And you know what the base of that lamp is? It's a flute. At the top, there's a light. But that structure, the flute was not designed to be a lamp base. It was designed to play music, right? So that's an example of the corruption or perverse use of that instrument. See, that structure. I'm telling you the truth, right? You can take issue. I say this to some of my friends. They take issue with me, but I am not moved. Because I understand. I fully understand. There's structure and everything. Our relationships would work better if we understood structure. Structure dictates function. Okay? in human beings. There's a reason why the genders are different. There's a reason why, and there's some issues with that right now. You see, I understand it, and I'm very comfortable with it, and I try to work along with it, but I know it's in the mainstream. There are people who think differently. And for that reason, we have problems in society in order to interact with each other. Because truth is not the value of everybody.
I think we have another question here.
Okay, I share a common bond with both of you guys. First of all, Hubert, I love your sister Eloise. I fell in love with her when I was 13 watching her on the Johnny Carson show back in the day. Right over here.
Oh, okay.
So I fell in love with Eloise when I was watching Johnny Carson many years ago. And with Brian, last time I saw you was at the Monterey Jazz Festival, which was maybe 4 years ago. I can't remember.
That was a long time. It was about 10 years ago.
Yeah,
now.
and what we share in common, not we, but Gil Scott and I were both born April 1st. So, and you guys, man, y'all wrote my history. I'm from the Bronx. I left the Bronx in '71. So,
Brooklyn, Bronx, yeah.
And I lived in Houston for a minute. I had to get out of Houston. I couldn't stand Houston. But anyway.
Another connection.
Wait a minute. Houston, Texas?
You must be talking about Houston, Maryland, right? I ain't talking about
Hey, listen, Houston is a place. What makes a place of people.
You know what?
Right? So, it's the people that I focus on.
I had a problem with the mosquitoes, man.
Oh, okay.
Leave it at that. I had a problem with mosquitoes.
You're not supposed to interact with the mosquitoes.
And do we have a question?
We have a question, not a comment on mosquitoes. You went to Juilliard. Did you aspire at any point to actually become a flautist in a major symphony orchestra? And the companion question is, did the color of your skin impact your classical music experience and aspirations at Juilliard?
Well, that's a compound question, but I'll take the first part. Yes, to answer your question, it had some impact, but it didn't affect me where it slowed me down. You see, because I came from Houston at the time that, matter of fact, I appeared as soloist with the Houston Youth Symphony when I first started playing the flute. And I talked to the conductor. I almost remembered his name. But anyway, I asked him, I said, I want to play with that orchestra. I couldn't be in it, but I could be a part as a soloist. So in other words, I could not be a part of that. So at the time, it did not deter me. I still wanted to learn to play the flute in the way that I'd heard it. I loved the sound of that flute, but it was in this symphonic environment. So that's why I pursued people who played in the orchestra. When I got to Juilliard, there were some other obstacles, but what the prevailing feature for me was to learn how to play this instrument, and all of the other things were just extraneous. People allow themselves to become victimized. They become victims. Yep. So you let it deter you, let it slow you down, let it impede your progress. As I look back, that was not my interest. That is, focusing on those things. I didn't look at it as an obstacle. I just kind of worked myself around it because I knew that there was something about my father that instilled in me hard work. My father worked 2 jobs, 40 years. He'd go to work, he started at 7 o'clock in the morning, you get off that first job, go to the second at 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, came home at midnight, 5 days a week. Wow. Saturday, work half day. So to me, it was an example for hard work. So I was not deterred at all by what you mentioned earlier about color of your skin. No.
What happened to the aspiration to do symphonic music? Did you just take a turn?
No. When I first heard it, I knew that there was quality there. Like I told you earlier, when you hear the ring of truth, it resonates. I heard that music, I said, wow, man, this is wonderful stuff. And most people don't hear it. I feel so selfish when I'm on the airplane sometimes. I listen to this music, I say, man, all the other passengers, I know that most of them are totally oblivious to this music. I wish they could enjoy it like I am. Because I know it would impact their lives in such a way, it will help them to lead better quality life. We want the best quality in everything. We want good things. We should have them. But they are sometimes obliterated by the society in which we live and what we're exposed to. So I told those 20 students over at Soka University, I told them, I says, don't be soaked in by that was dumped in your lap. No, you have to pursue the truth. You have to pursue it. It's a work. You have to, like my dad worked those hours. He was trying to take care of his family. My dad's one of the greatest influences on me to this day. He died on September 15th, 1998. But his memory still influences me.
You should know that Mr. Laws's most recent album is Rachmaninoff and Barber.
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't see an either or there. He continues to pursue that as well as jazz.
Yeah, that's one of them. Oh, I didn't mention something else. My good friend Chick Corea called me at the end of 2020 and says, Hubert, let's do a piano and flute duo album. I was like sometime in, I think that was somewhere in September, October 2020. So he began, because of COVID, you know, we did all of this through the internet. He sent me his piano part, I put my flute on it, and we had gone to school. I think I told you I met him earlier at Juilliard in 1961. So, but our careers have sort of gone in and out. We've recorded on each other's records and stuff like that. I have the greatest respect for a chick. We're talking about quality. Oh my God, that guy. But anyway, as we progressed, we ended up doing 4 tracks. He liked classical music too, so his favorite composers were like Mozart and Scarlatti. And we did a Bach piece. But we were unable to finish it because I got the news on February 11th. My friend called me and told me, Hubert, you know Chick passed away. I said, whoa. I was stunned the whole day. I just sat there in my office. I was just stunned. But you mentioned the last record. That wasn't the last one. That wasn't the Rocks Bottom, but the one that Chick and I did that was supplemented by some duets I had done with my pianist, David Buckley. So we had already done like about 10 or 12 tracks, and it was in my archives, had not been released. It was a perfect opportunity to complete that desire of Chick to have a piano and flute duet CD. So it is actually, I brought some here. Not here, but for the concert.
We have another question.
This is for Hubert too. Hubert John Vincent. We've had email exchanges over the years.
I heard that name. Where are you?
I'm right over here. Right over here.
Oh, okay.
Just wanted to ask you your feeling, and I think I might have emailed you about this. I just kind of would like to hear your feelings about the success of Lizzo, who has made millions and millions of dollars, multiple Grammys every year. Up until she was nominated and given all these Grammys, I think there was a handful of flutists in the 50 years that were even nominated, you being one of them. And along comes this gal, and she's getting 3 Grammys every year now, and she's become a multi-million. I just wanted to get your feeling on it.
Well, now, what did you say her name was?
Lizzo. Lizzo, and I'm glad you've never heard of her.
No, I can't give you any information on it because I don't really know her.
Oh, I'm glad. Oh, that just makes me feel great.
You feel better now?
I feel better now.
No,
The other thing I wanted to ask you is, you are from a musical family. Your brother Ronnie, Eloise, Deborah. Mm-hmm. Was your mother and father, were they musicians as well?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. I am really glad. My mother played piano for the local Baptist church choir. So there was a piano in our small house. And my mother tells me when I was 4 years old, I got up to that piano and began playing by ear. Now, I don't recall any real details, but I do know that I played piano without having taken lessons. So yes, she was a major influence. By the way, my mother just passed away on January 14th this year, and she was 103 years of age.
No wonder you're still playing.
We have about 5 minutes left, so I'm gonna bring it back to you guys. We'll see if we can get another question here. But the one thing I just want to ask you, since we're talking about function, and we're talking about, you know, the purpose of music, and certainly, Brian, what you and Gil created together and what you continue to do really speaks to the idea of music as a message-giving force and a uniting kind of force. And certainly, even with the fact that you're not working with lyrics that often, but sometimes you had your sisters on some of the albums that you recorded. The idea that music is this, you know, message deliverance system. Can you talk about how you see what is the function of a musician in society today as you see it?
Well, Gil and I started out as songwriters. We never intended to be performers. You know, we looked at the tradition of some of the great songwriters of for instance, Tin Pan Alley. We looked at the writers, the people like Oscar Brown Jr. And Langston Hughes and the poets that were combining lyrics with music. This was our goal. But then the material that we came up with, things like Toast to the People, Pieces of a Man, or The Prisoner, we had a hard time kind of picturing what popular artists would perform them. So it kind of we just eventually had to come to the realization that if we wanted anybody to hear these songs, we were going to have to perform them ourselves. And another thing that happened, we are children of television, we're children of the television age, and we spent a lot of time, therefore, watching advertising, commercials. During the time when I was coming up, there were ads for everything. I mean, there was a commercial for every possible thing. Later on, I understood the method behind that. But at the time, even as a youngster, I felt that something was wrong with the way that was being handled. I later found out that Madison Avenue was, they were basically trying to incorporate selling their products with philosophies and theories by Edward Bernays, who was a nephew of Sigmund Freud. So basically what people were doing in Madison Avenue was they were examining people, examining their heads, finding out in society what were our insecurities, what made us feel incomplete, the things that made us feel incomplete, and then they would target us with these products that were supposed to alleviate those vast spaces, these emptinesses that society had begun to create. And the way they were doing it was through music. So I'll give you a perfect example of McDonald's, for instance. Now, you can go to Tennessee, and you could go to Tennessee and hear a commercial for McDonald's, and it was all bluegrass. You could go to New York, and it was all funk and soul. You know, you could go somewhere else, and it would be jazz, so or pop. So we looked at that, and we kind of looked at each other and said, wait a minute. So they're using our music, they're using music and different types of music that different people resonate with, and selling them burgers. So why wouldn't we be able to use the music of our day, the popular music, soul music, R&B, jazz, a combination of those things, to sell revolutionary thought?
Yes.
And so that was the premise. That was basically what the music meant for us.
Thank you.
And we continue to try to do that today.
Mr. Laws, you want to provide us with a downbeat? How do you see your function?
How do I see my function?
What is the function of music?
Yes, that's an excellent question. I've tried to propound that to many people. And first of all, I want to say I feel like I am a vessel. I am a conduit. We talked about the structure of music earlier. It is definitely a structure. If you examine something called the overtones in music, you recognize it has structure. So if you have anything that's structured, there has to be a structurer. So when you do anything, any endeavor of yours, when you do it, would you like to get praise or receive some kind of commendation for what you do? Think about that. Now, there's an age-old proverb that says that every house that is built by someone. That's a structure. Every house is built by someone. So, I'm playing this music. I didn't create the music. I heard it, and I tried to imitate or emulate this art that I've been so benefited by. So I make friends with it, but I did not do that myself. So I feel like I'm just a part of it. So when anything that you do, don't you want to, bring praise to yourself for having accomplished it? Anything that you do, you mentioned Creed Taylor. We talked about the accomplishments of Creed Taylor.
Yeah.
We talked about the music, the audio and the visual, and he got a lot of commendation for that. Okay? Well, now, music, what is the function of music? Well, who created it? Where did it come from? Where did music come from?
Vibration.
Huh?
Vibration.
No, vibrations is something that has to start that vibration. Something has to start the vibration. Sound, it's organized sound, and it has a purpose. So we have to look at who is the source, or what is the source of the music. Because we say, I'm not. It was existing long before I got here. So then you can understand it's not for the purpose of self-aggrandizement, aggrandizing the person who happened to play it. That's not our purpose. I don't want to go back there. It takes too long. We have a little time. But once we determine who it is that provided and created the music, then we'll know better what our function is. It's not for getting all the praise and glory and all the award shows. Incidentally, I don't watch the Grammys too much anymore because I think that it has become something different from what I knew it to be years ago.
Yeah.
Okay? So it's more visual, what you're wearing, and even the music. They call it music. Most of that music now, I call it poetry and rhythm. And but music is comprised of three main components: melody, harmony, and rhythm. You can't get outside of that. But here again, truth in music is comprised of those three components. But as it becomes corrupted or contaminated, it becomes bereft of those three main components. That's why you see music now is focused most, a little kid, a little toddler responds to rhythm. They may not understand the music or the harmony or the melody, but they start moving because the rhythm propels them. Because that's our baser instincts. But should we remain toddlers? We have to grow up. Very quickly, my driver coming in picked us up at the airport. We were talking about this maturity in music. Now, I thought about my experience, personal experience. In New York City back in the 60s, the Beatles came to town. And the teenagers were yelling and screaming. They couldn't even hear the music. What are they screaming? They can't hear it. So, but at that time, those guys supplanted people like Frank Sinatra, Tony Bennett, Bing Crosby, all those guys back there. They were the ones who had the hits. Wow, they were crooners. They had melody, had harmony, and the rhythm. But the focus was not just on the rhythm, it was on the melody and the harmony, as well as the rhythm. Now, what happened recently, just recently, I say within the last 5 years or more, so I got a call from Johnny Mandel. He wanted me to participate on a recording session at Capitol Records in Los Angeles. Guess who was the artist who asked to put this orchestra together? Paul McCartney. Paul McCartney. And you know what music he was doing? The music they had supplanted back in the 60s. Now that he come full circle. Why? Because this man finally recognized the validity of substantive music that they replaced. So I asked the driver, I said, man, have you ever noticed it going a different way? Because he himself had, he was a rock guy. He just loved rock. He said, man, I don't listen to that anymore. I said, why not? He said, well, my choice is different. He now listens to jazz and classical music. So I said, wow, have you ever noticed it going in the opposite direction? No. So that was a good example for me. I mean, this guy, and it's, you know, now, how old is Paul McCartney? He's somewhere in the late 70s, 80s. And yet, he's singing those songs that were produced, that they supplanted back there. And he had, you know, I was in the woodwind section. They had string section. They had a brass section, full orchestra.
Do you remember who the producer was?
I remember the arranger was Johnny Mandel.
Right.
I got the call from
Tommy LaPuma.
Oh, yeah,
Oh, really?
Tommy.
That was a Tommy LaPuma
you
production.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, so you know that record?
Oh, I know it.
Oh, okay.
And he took a lot. You know what he titled the album? It's from a Fats Waller tune. You know, I'm going to sit right down and write myself a letter. And the title of the album is Kisses on the Bottom.
I got to talk to you about that, because I never heard of that. I got to talk to you about that.
Guys, this is the part of my job here that I hate the most. I have to bring this to an end because we have shows to do tonight. Ryan, you have to be on in about 20, 25 minutes. Guys, thank you so much to all of you for being here. Please join me in thanking Hubert Laws, Brian Jackson, and PDX Jazz. Thank you.
See you upstairs.